We're here with Emmy Award-winning journalist Lyon and the author of Peace, Love, and Pepper Spray, which is coming out, and I just got a copy, and I'm getting another one for my dad, so I recommend that you get one. And thank you for being here. Yeah, as an inspiring writer, you really inspire me. You know, what you're known for is, at least in my view, is a woman that's going in and really stepping on the feet of prophets, and that's rendered YouTube videos, you being shot at, talking about your situation in Bahrain where you've had rifles and assault weapons pointed on your head.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. Or fortunately, because it makes a good story.
Yeah, of course.
So, I was wondering, like, if you do any normal stuff. Like, if you have, like, a family life, or, like, if you date me or anything like that.
Well, thank you so much. I will definitely come and talk with you on the show and hang out. I think you're an amazing guy. You're very inspirational to me as well. And, you know, it's weird to think that I think what is normal anymore. I don't do many normal things in my life. As I just said, I just got back from deep in the mountains of Mexico, and I'm always traveling and seeking adventure. For me, normalcy is following my passions and then hoping success will follow. And so that's what I try to do every day. I live every day like it's my last, and I think, how can I use my talents and my skills to leave a footprint on this planet that changes the direction we're heading into a positive direction.
And that has created success for you. Maybe you could talk about, for people that don't even know who you are, how you first came onto the scene. Maybe talk about when you began in Bahrain, or if there was a story before then that kind of started to set everything off, so people who don't know, because you're a well-known whistleblower, or somebody who's stepping on the hands and feet of profiteering off of destruction.
Well, basically I'm an investigative journalist and documentarian, and one of my first big national job was with CNN, and I was a documentary and investigative correspondent there, and it was an amazing opportunity for me. I looked at the job as a way to use their platform and their talented team to really get some of these messages out to the public and expose wrongdoing, which...
So did you have a secret agenda the whole time, that when you got a big opportunity, then you would then expose what you wanted to expose?
As far as exposing CNN?
Or exposing the Bahrain situation, things like that, because the difference is that there's lots of beautiful women that they hire, but you were thinking about what was happening and putting your own spin on what you wanted to cover.
Yeah, and it's really hard to do that in the mainstream media nowadays, because there are so much restrictions, whether it be legal restrictions or financial restrictions. So few corporations own every outlet, and they kind of set the rules and make it very difficult to be a journalist. So I went into CNN hoping that I could just be me, and was told I could just be me and do the stories that I love, and those are watchdog journalism type of stories where you expose corruption through actually submersing yourself in the story. You don't take anyone else's word for it. You actually go there and kind of live the story to figure out what's going on. It's the most pure form of journalism. And I was able to do that at CNN for a while, and I was very thankful to my bosses for that. And one of those stories, I ended up in Bahrain, which is a U.S. ally country, and our U.S. government is supporting an evil regime there that's gassing its people, it's shooting protesters in broad daylight. And while I was there, we witnessed those occurrences. We also were able to sneak into some of these villages and film rampant human rights abuses. We found ambulance drivers who had fled and had their legs broken by the regime. We had patients who were still in their hospital gowns at home, self-treating, pulling bullets out of their own skin because the hospital is taken over by the military. So Jake, I'm seeing this and I'm thinking, how the hell is the United States keeping this government up and still supporting them and sending them weapons when this is how they're using the weapons against the people? And
how much money in weapons are we putting into to help the government there?
I'd say a little more than $1 billion.
A year?
So a year. And so it's, or no, I'm sorry, since the mid-90s.
Okay.
So to me that was worrisome as a U.S. citizen, because I said, why is our government propping up this evil regime? And I saw directly on the ground the effects. You know, I saw the blood, I saw these injuries, and while we were in one of these villages, we had snuck away from our government minders, and we were sneaking into the villages real quick and just shooting as much video as possible. Because the government had told us the protesters were faking their injuries with makeup.
Oh my gosh!
So we had to prove that they really weren't doing that. And so we were able to sneak in these villages and get this great video, and then all of a sudden we look up and there's helicopters above us, and that was my oh shit moment where about, you know, you just know something's about to happen. So we were able to hide our most important video. It was shot on small discs on our bodies. And then as we were leaving, we were thrown on the ground at gunpoint and surrounded by masked men wearing, carrying machine guns and screaming in Arabic. I had no idea what they were saying. I just, from it, I mostly just remember just laying on the ground thinking, oh gosh, you know, I hope they don't shoot. I hope we don't lose our discs, because it was hidden on my body. I didn't want it to fall out. And luckily, about 9 hours later, we were released, thanks to a lot of calls made by CNN. And we got back to the United States, and I did the first thing any journalist would do, and that's go on air right away and let the public know what was happening in Bahrain. And that was great. That worked out at the beginning. I was able to go on and talk about this story a lot. But then I noticed there was more and more red tape. It became more and more difficult to get stories on, and I couldn't understand what was going on. There was almost a coordinated effort to stop stories from going on air about Bahrain. And we ended up producing a documentary on it. And then that documentary never aired on CNN International. After several of my colleagues wrote me and said to investigate, I found out that CNN was taking money from the Bahrain regime to air programs that made the regime look positive, and they've been doing that for years. And
probably since the 90s when it started, or do you have any idea when that started?
It went back a couple years, because I found some video clips. So I know it went back at least a couple years, but I asked CNN to disclose how much money they were taking from Bahrain, and they refused to do so.
Oh yes.
Surprise, surprise. And I felt, there's a lot of amazing people that work at that network, and I felt defrauded as a journalist. I think they did too. I was the only one who came out and spoke about it publicly. And I also felt like CNN is defrauding viewers, and this is a problem in the mainstream media worldwide, and that's that they're confusing advertising with journalism. Journalism is printing what someone else doesn't want printed. Taking money and producing positive content for dictators is not journalism. And so I just felt I was having trouble sleeping at night knowing all of this, that this was going on, and I felt a duty to the people of Bahrain to expose what was happening, because they were getting screwed over the most. And it's really unfortunate, because they're amazing people, and all they want is what we have, just basic liberty and freedom.
So you're talking about how there's basically the same way we have problem, reaction, solution. Here's a problem, we'll blow this up, and then you freak out, and then we'll take your freedoms with the Patriot Act, and there's a system to do that. Mm-hmm. Being somebody who's involved directly or was directly within very mainstream media, is there a system for how they're using propaganda? Besides, I heard you on Joe Rogan's show saying in a sexy voice, the weapons of mass destruction. Yeah. Is there a system for how that's happening?
I feel like most of it is propaganda. I mean, a lot of what you're seeing on mainstream news is, and once you can spot it, you start to notice it. A lot of it is just instilling fear in the public, making the public think they need, you know, the police to come and rescue them because there's these terrorists out on the street or mass shooters, and you need to give up your guns. And once you start recognizing and are awake to the fact that a lot of these media outlets are not set up to give you true journalism, they are propaganda machines. I don't want to specifically name any that I didn't work for, but I'm sure you can, you know, you
I'll
can
name
put two
them.
and two together. Yeah. And it's so unfortunate, because as someone who grew up in the Midwest, and I know many of my family members are still victims to this propaganda, a lot of people aren't awake to it. So when they watch the news and they see that, remember when they used to have the orange and red terror alerts?
Yes,
like just psychologically freak us out all the time?
I was like in 6th grade.
That's not journalism. You know, that's propaganda. And when they watch that and they watch all this coverage of maps, to create a public that's uneducated and a public that's willing to go into Iraq or Afghanistan for our safety and our freedom. And that's the ultimate goal. And it's not journalism. And even when I was at CNN, I saw a lot of decisions being made that weren't being made because journalistically. I could never understand what was going on because I would have some great, amazing stories, but then they would get killed or they would get shelved, and I never understood
the people
why.
that you were getting information were getting killed. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I'm sorry. The story itself was getting killed. That's a term in broadcasting.
Okay.
Like the story was just
Gotcha.
never aired.
Okay.
You know, and I even remember one time meeting an executive at CNN for dinner in near Columbus Circle in this really ritzy steakhouse. And I had just come from Zuccotti Park where I had been with the protesters photographing actually some of the photos for this book. And for Peace, Love, and no plug, Peace, Love, and Pepper Spray, yeah.
Full plug.
I remember I was, you know, I remember I had gone to the bathroom before to like wipe the dirt off and brush my hair and try to look nice. I was still in I always wore my boots and my backpack, and I went in and I sat down, and you know, I'm trying to tell him how amazing Occupy is and how historic it is, and we need to cover it to really document this. This is one of the first times in recent history that we had so many people voicing their anger. And my boss, in his nice suit, who happened to be spending the majority of the dinner looking around for Jamie Dimon instead of paying attention to what I was
Jamie
saying.
Dimon?
He's a major executive.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. And
so he's really interested in what you had to say?
No, he wasn't. and I remember telling him how amazing Occupy was and how we should cover it more at CNN. And he looked at me and he said, Occupy doesn't deserve to be covered.
Huh.
And he said, it's not big enough, and we're throwing out all these excuses. And it's annoying, and it's this, and I just remember clearly he said, Occupy doesn't deserve to be covered. And at that point, I just, like, my heart just sank as a journalist, and I realized that was the nail in the coffin for me. I realized decisions weren't being made at the network for journalistic purposes. They were just being made for other reasons.
Did you quit?
No, eventually I was laid off at CNN. So they just all, yeah. I didn't quit, and some people ask me, why didn't you quit right away? I didn't actually find out that Bahrain was paying CNN until after I'd been laid off. All of that was uncovered. Also, I was able to get a 12-minute long documentary about Anonymous and Occupy on air. So for me, I was using it as a platform.
Right.
And I didn't want to lose that platform. But then it got to a point where I realized maybe I should have just quit and made a big deal of it. But I was able to get a couple really good stories in before they dissolved our investigative and documentary unit. And I got the idea for that book then because I realized they were never going to cover Occupy correctly. And I realized a lot of the mainstream just had shut Occupy out. They made it kind of the annoying story.
Yeah, right.
You know, and that was the feeling around the newsroom that was spread, and it was a psychological some operation or something that they made the majority of the producers feel like Occupy was annoying, and oh gosh, is that another Occupy story? So I actually, to cover Occupy, I had to sneak it into a documentary about Anonymous because Anonymous was sexy.
There you go.
And so I made the documentary how Anonymous is watching over Occupy. And in fact, my bosses didn't really know until it was too late. Then they had to air it, and I got a complaint from one saying, there's way too much Occupy in this documentary. But I was able to get it in. You know, and so that's why it was so important for me to continue to work there and I was able to maneuver some things and get some important stories on air. That being said, when you find out your employer is being paid off by a dictator, it's kind of disheartening, you know, to say the least. So,
how has your life been directly threatened, and most people aren't even willing to stop going to a job that they don't want to do because of the fear of that. And the reason that I wanted to interview you is because I wrote in the book that I signed to you that you inspire me to the level of Martin Luther King, to the level of Gandhi. Like, wow, you know that you're like, you're the one. Thank you.
No, I appreciate it.
How do you deal with how do you go beyond the fear of that? Because, I mean, your life's been threatened, yeah?
I don't think my life has directly been threatened.
Are you scared that it is in threat?
You know, I went through a period of time after I had come out, because it was such a difficult decision to come out against because you know the decisions being made at many of these media outlets aren't just being made by the media outlets. There's some other force at play. And so I knew I was up against that force. And I think I'm the only one in the history of CNN who's come out so vocally. And so, but for me, it was a matter of, I look at it like this. So many investigative journalists spend so much time trying to do good in this world. And they're sitting in their newsrooms all day, okay, how can I do this investigation to make a difference, and how can I research this? But really the elephant in the room is the behavior of these media companies. And a lot of them just need to turn around and look at, for investigative content, and just look at the behaviors of their bosses. And I started to think that as I was deciding whether to come out, I started to think more and more that the biggest problem we have facing this nation, one of the biggest problems, in addition to the corruption, is our media. Because it is constantly feeding the public propaganda and disinformation to confuse people and turn people into sheep. And I just thought if I would come out, more people would. I don't think it's necessarily how to document.
How are you able to come out? Most people are scared about even failing for starting a business. Like your life, anyone who, I mean, it happens time and time again. Martin Luther King, Gandhi, you name it, they've been killed because they've directly threatened the power structures. And you directly threaten the power structures. For somebody most people are watching this and they probably don't have information that can tear down a regime, but they may have something that scares them about doing it. How do you do, I'm like, how the fuck does she do that?
Yeah, I just think that for me, my love for this country and for the people in this country and my love for the environment and, I've just had enough. So I'm at the point where I encourage everyone. I mean, we all are at such a vital turning point in humanity where things can go either really, really well or really, really south. And if we all just use our talents and our skills and come out against corruption, then I think that we will be able to turn the tide.
So that's a solution, like creating images anew rather than subjecting ourselves to what's coming through in the mainstream.
Yeah, exactly. And also to look for independent journalists and independent outlets. You can't trust, while the mainstream will do a couple good stories now and then, overall, they're set up to disinform people and send you...
How do we fix that? How do you fix that fact if the entire media system, mainstream media system, is set up that way? How can it end?
Yeah, well, a great journalist, Seymour Hersh, recently wrote an op-ed for The Guardian, and he said the only way to fix it would be to fire 90% of the editors.
But how does that happen if the...
It will never happen.
Yeah, right.
So you have to create new. So instead of fixing the old, because it's so broken, believe me, and there's so many individuals who are just functioning as sheep journalists because of safety reasons, and I'm not criticizing them, I'm just saying the system as a whole.
I'm criticizing them for it.
It's broken. So in order to fix it, we need to create something new.
Like Buckminster Fuller quote.
Exactly, and I'm very hopeful in Glenn Greenwald's teaming up now with the man who founded eBay to start a new news network. I would highly trust that. Glenn.
So we need some rich people that are...
Yeah, exactly. We need them to invest in journalism. And I think that for so long there's been a smear campaign.
Create new media systems. Like, okay, instead of CNN, we'll create an independent media system that has the financial backing in order to compete with it in terms of outreach.
Of course. And this one with Glenn Greenwald gives me the most hope because Glenn helped me expose the CNN stories, and I trust Glenn, and he is an extremely genuine journalist who's in the field for the right reasons, and he's one of the most... Talk about me being brave. I mean, he's up against the NSA. He exposed all those stories. So he's a hero of mine, and I see this new outlet as really being a model that's going to come out and be able to compete with these dinosaur media outlets.
Media.
You can never get in and fix it. You'll never be able to get in and fix it from the inside. I tried relentlessly, and it's not able to happen. So the only alternative, instead of just criticizing what they're doing wrong, is to take everything they're doing wrong and not do that and start a new outlet. Start from the ground up. And that's why I have so much faith in Glenn's organization. And it really, when I heard that he was getting the funding for this, I just had a sigh of relief as a journalist, because I was like, wow, now someone is going to have the support and funding to do this right and someone who really understands pure, true journalism. So,
what is the step that you think that the average person can start taking, a young person can start taking? Is it, what do you think it is? Because I feel like, as someone who's in the, I mean, you're only a few years older than me, but
yeah, just a couple years
just
older
a couple,
than you.
you're like 20, 30 or something, so you're only
20, 30, yeah, I like to say that, that's what I'll just say from now
you're
on.
2030 years old.
Yeah.
What's the next step that young people can take? Is it to start using creativity? What do you see? You know, this is what I think. I think that we're so focused on independent news sources, oftentimes the average person who's not already actively seeking it gets worn out by it, because all we're doing is reporting on the problems, and if we're in that state, most people, it's too overbearing. They're like, turn that off. I can't even take it.
Yeah.
So what does Amber Lyon think that they can do?
Well, I think now, unfortunately, like you said, a lot of people have a lot of anxiety because a lot of people are waking up and they're thinking, oh wait, was 9/11 planned? Was, look at what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. Oh my gosh, have I been lied to my entire life, down to when I was 5 years old and I opened a history book in elementary school. And it's really, as someone who is now awake to everything that's going on too, having grown up with that Midwest mentality that the U.S. is the best and brightest, and
we're 26 for literacy amongst developing nations, so clearly we're the best.
Yeah, of course. You know, we've been lied to since we were. For me, it was such a rude awakening because I did grow up in Middle America, where you're completely sheltered and you're fed a lot of BS. And so I think a lot of people have a lot of anxiety. They don't know what to do. They don't want to turn on the news. But I think we're at a critical time where we really need people to be involved, especially on social media. And it's easy, it's slacktivism. You can do it from your couch, you know? You don't even need to go out we're seeing protest evolve, and I have a chapter in my book how it's evolving from the streets to the web. And you can be just as effective participating in some of these online protests, as well as signing petitions, galvanizing groups of people who have similar beliefs and passions, and that will give you control by going on and just taking information and sharing it. And it is effective, even if you only have 100 followers. How do you know that one of your 100 followers doesn't share a tweet you sent that then gets to someone who has 1 million followers, that then gets to someone who has 2 million followers? You can see one little tweet spread to 3 million people like that. So everyone can make a difference, especially using Twitter and Facebook to share information. And I've seen armies of people come out and do that, and that's also enabling us independent journalists to compete with the big networks, because we can just do a story, put it on our blog, and then people will share it, and sometimes we get more views and comments than
the major news sources.
Yeah, and so it helps. So everyone can do that, especially by supporting independent journalism right now.
How do you smile whenever you're sharing topics that most people are not smiling about? When you're checking out your videos, things like that, how do you, most people lose hope. Everything's fucked, everything's screwed. How does somebody keep hope? How do you suggest somebody keeps hope that's watching this and they're hearing this and they're saying, oh my gosh, this is happening, our government's supporting this, our government's supporting that, and right now the things that are happening with and now the Secret Service can arrest us or whatever. How do we laugh about that? You and I are laughing, some people are like,
you either laugh or cry, you know, that's what I say. And you gotta just keep the hope. And I have so much faith in, and like I said, we're at a unique time in the history of mankind where we can go in one of two directions. And so I have the hope that enough people, because of social media. If social media wasn't around, I'd be a little... if we were back, 20 years ago...
You'd be crying.
I'd probably be locked up somewhere, because now, fortunately, I have enough support that if I disappeared or something, it would get talked about. So, thankfully, social media gives me a lot of hope that we can turn things around. We're sharing information. People are communicating from Zimbabwe to New York to Turkey to Los Angeles about... And they're all joining up and communicating about their dissatisfaction with governments worldwide. And I think we're kind of in that conscious evolution where we're realizing as a world that we are all connected. These borders are fictitious. These all the nationality has been created to divide us, when in reality we are just one human race that wants to live here peacefully.
Except for the Middle East.
Except for the Middle East, which the majority of the fighting there was created, unfortunately, by the United States. So yeah. No, but you know, it's just I try to smile and have a lot of hope because I believe we can turn things around. I know we can, and that's why I put everything in to help steer this a different way, to do my part. Which one of them is the whistleblowing, you know, and I know a lot of people out there potentially have issues maybe at work or whatnot where they're seeing something that's horrific going on, and I encourage them to whistleblow as well, because if we don't know what's broken, how can we fix it? So I just try to stay positive.
Try to stay positive. So like I always say, like, people usually ask a question like that prevents them, that paralyzes them. They say, what's the worst that could happen? And then what's the worst that could happen? Well, this could happen, and then we figure out all these things that may happen sometime down the road. I say instead, okay, well, what's the best that could happen? If I take this step, if I start to do this. So what's some things happening right now that you're really passionate? Where are you spending your time researching, looking into right now? What are some things happening that, you know, online, you know, I want to talk about different things than you just talking about, like Bahrain and some places like that, because that is online. I love it, and it inspires me, but I'd like to, what's more trending right now and people that are listening to this.
So some things that are just happening news-wise and stuff, or that I've been working on?
Anything that you want to share, like
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll tell you about.
I don't control what you can talk about here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're a good host then. Let's see. Okay, so one thing we're talking about keeping positive. Look at the difference that happened when we didn't end up entering Syria, because all the people stood up and said, we've had enough, we're not going there. So that also gave me a lot of hope. When I saw that, going back to what you'd asked me before, I forgot to mention this, that's tangible proof that if enough of us stand up and fight back, we can make change. And we didn't go into Syria. So that gives me a lot of hope. I've also personally been just traveling the world and working on coming up with ways to ease that anxiety. I think we have...
Tell us some, please.
Yeah.
I'm really anxious right now.
I think, well, and so is the majority of American adults.
Yeah, most American adults. I mean, I think especially people in the older generation. My dad is someone who's very aware of what's happening, and I feel when my dad always says, it's hard because I've been lied to for 56 years of my life. And when especially older people have been in the system for that long, it's hard not to be extremely hateful towards what's happening. That even took me a little bit when we were talking about when I got arrested at Keystone XL pipeline. But they didn't give us water one day, and I said, where's our water? He said, I'm not your mom. I was just like, what? How do you, like...
How do you overcome the anger?
Yeah.
You know, I had a lot of anger. I mean, if you can imagine...
Did you have a lot of trauma?
I did. Oh, yeah. Well, I think the worst was when not only the detainment in Bahrain, and then what was the most traumatic for me wasn't even the detainment. It's that I had this story and I knew these people were being killed and abused, and I couldn't get it on air because they were creating so many roadblocks. And to me, that was like torture because you know these people are being hurt, and you want to just scream as loud as you can and say, someone help them. And instead my stuff was being screened. It was becoming difficult to produce the stories. I wasn't even at one point allowed to tweet about Bahrain. So that was
What
tough.
do you mean you weren't allowed to? Couldn't you just do it anyways?
I was told, I was told one time that I needed to get permission and have my tweets screened.
Oh my gosh.
So you can imagine that, for me, that was so traumatic. And then when I came back to shoot for this book, at one point I was fired at by Anaheim police. I was photographing a protest, an anti-police brutality protest, and I was fired at in the middle of the road. They just started shooting at us, and I went and hid behind 2 trucks. And for a couple of minutes, I didn't know if I was going to get hit or what was going on, and I was just in such shock that this was happening in the U.S. And so that was a bit traumatic as well. So I've had
and you can
just
find
various
this on
things.
YouTube.
Yeah, you can Google it, like Amber Lyon fired on by Anaheim police. It's so crazy to think that you're standing in the United States and you're a journalist just photographing a protest and you're fired at, you know.
Or a human being at all.
Yeah, exactly, you know, and so that was really rough. And so between all of that, it was and then coming out against CNN, it was a lot of kind of really stressful events compiled into one, and I felt that anger, and I felt it kind of eating me up because I was so upset that people could be just so cruel, you know, so disappointed in humanity. But now I've been able to evolve and go toward the point of not anger, but using that energy, that negative energy, for positive and actively looking for solutions. So instead of constantly going down the rabbit hole, trying to find what the U.S. government has done, which you could go there forever.
Yeah.
You need to stop and then take that energy and be productive with it and look for solutions.
Say that again. That was beautiful. Yeah. Exactly. That's what I want to hear, because that's what I feel. You know, Prison Planet, InfoWars, they're doing so much great stuff, but I think there is a next step that we can continue to take by channeling that energy. Like when it happened when we got arrested, I was like, instead of figuring out everything, I was like, that was the stupidest thing. That like made me want to write the book faster, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So please say
Use that to keep yourself moving forward. Do not keep going down that rabbit hole. Once you're awake enough, that's all you need. You don't need to know that the CIA was testing LSD on agents back in 1960. You know, once you've gone there and you've realized the truth, that's enough. Then take that negative energy, take that emotion, and use it to better humanity and come up with solutions. And that's something I've been working on now journalistically, is looking into psychedelics and alternative medicines. They have an incredible cure rate when it comes to PTSD and addiction and depression and anxiety, things that are affecting 1 in 5 American adults right now.
Which I believe is an incredible understatement. In the same way with 1 in 6 people are in poverty.
Yeah.
It's so much more than that.
It's got to be almost everyone. Once you're awake to the reality of what the U.S. government's been doing, I think everyone who has a little bit of anxiety about
so what are these some of the solutions? You're saying a few minutes ago, I've been looking at possible anxiety solutions.
So even as a journalist, instead of going back and saying, okay, we have one hell of a prescription drug addiction problem, we are turning our adults into zombies with these prescription antidepressants.
And kids. I flipped my car 4 times 400 feet down a ravine when I was a junior in high school when I was on pills and stuff, you know, because they're readily accessible. I think it's...
Was it like OxyContin?
I was taking Xanax bars.
Yeah. Were you like snorting them or?
Just doing pretty much everything. Snorting them. Yeah. Sometimes I take, you know, by 7 o'clock in the morning before class, I was already high, and then I'd pass out on my desk. And I actually down in San Diego, North County, San Diego, where I'm from, I know about 10 or 12 kids that I personally went to high school with that have overdosed either on tar or OxyContin. Taking the OxyContin down and freebasing it or melting it down and shooting up. A guy about 3 weeks ago passed out, died in his car on the side of the road in Encinitas, which is it's definitely not the ghetto.
Yeah, of course, and they're just flooding these prescription drugs into the market, and people say, well, you need to blame the user, I look at it as a human rights issue right now in this country, especially if you go to the OxyContin.
Tell us why. I've never heard somebody say that before. I don't disagree.
Because some people will take these medicines and they're not aware of how addictive they are, and they're not being told that. Some people I've interviewed, I've done a lot of reporting on OxyContin addiction.
Oh, really?
And some of them are just having back injuries, and they'll get prescribed the pills and they get hooked like that. My cousin, who was 16, went to a party and was given OxyContin.
Oh, wow.
And he wasn't educated, and he just took it, and it flipped something in his brain, and then he developed a massive addiction for several years, then switched to heroin, then was jailed.
Oh, shit.
And this was a football star, otherwise, he was leading down a really successful path, and the oxys just got in the way. So he was not made aware of how addictive they are. So because they're so addictive, I think it is a human rights issue, and they're flooding the market. I also think it's a...
Should we start arresting people?
Yeah. Start arresting the doctors down in Florida who just pass it out like water. And then you also have babies being born addicted, Jake. That's one of the last stories I did with CNN.
Why? Because why?
Because their mothers are addicted. So the mothers take, say, OxyContin or Xanax and get hooked, and then they can't quit while they're pregnant because the baby could miscarry, so they have to continue using. And then when the baby's born, they actually go through withdrawal just like a human would who's trying to get off OxyContin, and they're given morphine. And I was there in the NICU witnessing a baby who'd just been born being given morphine and going through withdrawal.
Oh my
and
gosh.
This was a NICU in East Tennessee that they had to rebuild.
This is in America.
In America. But this is very underreported because the prescription drug industry has a stranglehold on media. Surprise, surprise. And so when you see that, you're just like, whoa, this is a disaster. So as a journalist, I'm taking this anger now and using it to look for solutions. And some of the solutions are in psychedelics. There's a psychedelic called Ibogaine. I've talked to several pill addicts who went down to Mexico, and it's legal there. It's not legal in the United States. And they were able to cure their addictions in 2 or 3 days. And this is a heroin addiction that's nearly impossible to cure through traditional therapy and rehab. And they're able to go down there with this root from Central Africa and cure their addictions in 2 or 3 days. Some people describe it as 30 years of therapy in 3 days. And so,
it's like
but we're not being told about
Hunter
this.
S. Thompson when he's talking about, what is it, Muskie doing the thing?
Yeah, mescaline?
Yeah. No, he's talking about, what's his face, Muskie, or whatever his name was, when he was cut Fear and Loathing on the campaign trail, and he made up a story about, I forget who it was taking Ibogaine before speeches and stuff, just made it up, and he admitted to it after.
It'd be nearly impossible. I mean, that's a really strong psychedelic. It sends you into a trip that lasts almost 36 hours, and you're just violently vomiting, but at the same time, it's extremely effective in curing all of these mental disorders. And so we're just not, as a public, we're not being fed the truth, and we're being told to go take Xanax or any of these other anti-anxieties or antidepressants.
That are even altering our brain chemistry, that's been proven.
Of course, and it disassociates you. So I was interviewing a soldier who was put on Xanax, and he said when he was sitting in class, he had PTSD. He was sitting in class and he's writing his test, and he looks down at his hand and he's like, is that my hand doing the writing? That doesn't feel like my body.
Oh my gosh.
And he said he'd go through life just detached from his body and his actions, and you're just sitting there thinking, how the hell can someone prescribe this for someone? Yeah, it alleviated his PTSD slightly, but he got to the point where he felt better with the PTSD symptoms.
Did it really alleviate it, or did it just postpone it?
It postponed it. And this is an individual who then went and tried shrooms or psilocybin mushrooms. And after one trip, he was dramatically cured. He was able to go
off shrooms, huh?
Yeah. And so we're not being fed the true story. Just like marijuana, we were lied to by the media and the government. The same thing's happening with psychedelics. And so I see psychedelics as a huge solution for so many issues we're facing in the United States, especially with mental health disorders. But they can't be patented, Jake. So if you can't be patented, you can't make money, and that's why the industry has shut them out. So journalistically, I'm looking for solutions. I've been trying to highlight the benefits of psychedelics as well. That's my next kind of phase in my career. I did the protesting, spent many years out on the streets covering protests, and now I've shifted to, okay, so if you're at a protest and you've been shot at by police and you have PTSD, here's how you can you can cure it, you know.
Okay, Amber, so here for people watching, of course you can see you're a beautiful blonde woman, and a lot of times women feel, especially young women, feel, what can I do? Or I'm powerless, or how can I you're taking strong action.
Yeah.
What do you say to like a young, I think that's something that's missing, the role models for young women. What do you say to a young woman who thinks I'm not beautiful, or thinks I'm not capable, or because I'm a woman I can't go and do what you're doing? A lot of times I hear all the time, I'm not going to travel, I'm not going to go here or do this because I'm a woman.
Oh really? Yeah, it's I've never looked at it as something that's brought me down or made it difficult to do my job. I've always looked at it as an advantage, especially in when I've been in tense situations. Women tend to be able to talk to talk away the anger in the group, and they can ease tension. So it only helped me in so many times in my career. And then I think too that that as a woman, you know, we tend to sometimes be more stubborn. and
do you think that's played to your advantage because it's allowed you to be persistent with what you're doing?
Yeah, of course. and it's never come in my way. So I don't see why any woman out there should ever say because I'm a woman I shouldn't travel, or because I'm a woman I
What do you say to a young woman that thinks I can't go out and put myself out there, I can't go and do this?
If you say that, you're not going to do it. You know, if you say in anything in life, you say you can't. I've heard that so many times in my career. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't. So many times I've come up with ideas and I've been told I can't.
How do you deal with people telling you you can't? Or
I just ignore them completely. Like, you should always ignore anyone who is, I call them emotional vampires, because I really believe you can do anything you set your mind to, especially if you're passionate about it. Follow your passions, and no matter what, success will follow, because you'll always do a better job than the guy next to you because you're truly passionate about that, and it will work. And anyone who has a mentality that I can't do this because I'm a woman, or I'm black, or I'm too short or too tall, I mean, you can't think that way. Once you think that way, you're not going to accomplish your goal. Just always go in thinking, I can do this. And I've never done a book before. And before this, I did mostly video and not still photos, but I just bought a camera and I knew I was passionate and I knew I had to do this. And then just started flying to protests and photographing. And because of that, someone had seen some of my work and then offered to publish a book.
Did you have limiting beliefs that you would be able to do it? Or going through the process of it?
Never. I never thought that I wouldn't be able to do it, because I've always had the mindset that if I feel like I can do it, I can do it. You know, and that's what you need to have. The second you add a little doubt.
Wasn't the answer I was looking for.
What were you looking for?
For you to be like, yeah, it was like I was crying on my floor and then this is what I did.
Oh no, this book became a monster in many ways, just getting it done, because there's so many images in there that I had to go back and relive events. And but at the same time, it's difficult to put together. I went through a lot of struggle. That being said, I just always am in the mindset you can do whatever you want to do. So
you vote?
Me, I don't.
You don't vote. Why?
I take the Russell brand.
I do as well, and I'm channeling your journalistic perspective to ask you why you don't do that.
Okay, and this to me is A, I don't want a dog in the race. I need to be able to analyze everyone equally and criticize everyone equally. And I feel like if I were to go and vote for one candidate, it would just kind of plant a seed in my mind to maybe be more friendly with that candidate, or I just don't want a dog in the race.
Because as a journalist, you're taking an objective approach to deliver facts or your views to mainstream, and if you attach to one side, then it will probably turn into biased information. Is that what you're saying?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, how can you say you're not biased and then say you wouldn't
vote for someone?
You know, I'm completely unbiased, but I did vote for Barack Obama. And then also, it's because I've gotten to the point where, just based on everything I've seen with the censorship in the media, with the state of the U.S. government, that the two-party system is failing. Yeah, it's rigged, and it's a facade, and it's meant to divide us, just like borders are, and I don't believe that. I just don't believe that it's effective, and I don't believe it's legit. I feel like you say, like it's rigged, and it's hard for people. It's been very difficult for me to swallow that as someone who grew up in the Midwest, to know, like you said, your dad was lied to for 56 years. That I was lied to for my 2030s. However old we decided that I was. 2030. And so it's hard to realize that, but at the same time, I don't feel like we're going to get any reasonable change out of this system that's working the way it's working now. It's failing us miserably, and I believe it's time for an intellectual revolution. It's time to look at other ways to make it work besides what we're doing now.
What do you think some ways to make it? I think what we need to do personally is, I think that we should say fuck national elections, and everything should firstly be built up. My tax money shouldn't be going to national, where then they can take it to go fund whatever, drone strikes or wars. I think it should be going to go put money into the schools that are within a 50-mile radius of me, things like that. What do you think some solutions are that we can take? Because clearly, if we keep our democracy, then we're going to keep perpetuating this same cycle. What do you see as steps forward that we can take. I like to talk about that because I think, like you said, it's an endless cycle where you could say, and then what happened here, then what was this problem, and then what was this problem.
I think I agree with you. Everything needs to go back to being hyper-local, and where we have localized governments where our needs are being met just for our individual communities. Because I agree with what you say. When you send money in the national level, Lord knows where it's going, and it's not affecting your daily life.
Not to fixing our roads.
No. And so we just need to make everything hyper-local. I think also now is the time to, we don't know the fate of the dollar. It's really sketchy and disturbing at the same time.
I think we do know the fate of the dollar.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at a point. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts from people I trust in the financial industry.
Tell us a couple of those, please.
And Wall Street, not Main Street, I think is one of them. And then I listen to a lot of Peter Schiff. And what I gain from their podcast, and once again, I report on human rights issues, so all of this financial journalism and stuff is new to me. But after I'm trying to educate myself on what's going on, and I really feel like it's smart to have a contingency plan. It's smart right now to really connect with your neighbors, to build that sense of community around you.
Do you keep a bank account, or do you turn any money you have into metals, or what do you do?
I have money in a bank account, but I also buy tangible things with my money. I invested a lot in my photo gear. Televisions, yeah. No, more like property and actual things versus putting it in a bank, because we can't trust when or if the dollar is going to collapse. But all of logic is pointing at the fact that it's being printed out of thin air, and most likely it's going to collapse. And I hate to say I'm not a prepper, but actually the more I've been... You haven't dug a hole under your house? No, I haven't yet, but I think that we can all do a little bit of prepping, enough to, have a food supply for 2 to 3 months in case something goes wrong, find ways to protect yourself and your family, and just be prepared. Not to say that something is going to happen, but if you look at the probability, it is probable that the dollar that's printed out of thin air is going to collapse, and it is probable that if it does collapse, there will be food shortages, and there could be unrest. And probably extreme
civil duress.
And so I have just woken up to that, and I've just started realizing that that's an important action I think everyone can take, just to be prudent. Just make sure you have 2 to 3 months of food around, and make sure that you have kind of a game plan, so you're not just caught if something.
Which isn't, the game plan isn't to print out the Lakers roster and the playbook that they use for the triangle offense.
No.
Would that
would not be. It would help. It would help entertain you. Okay. If the power went out and you're kind of stuck at home. But I think it's smart to prep a little bit. Yeah. You don't need to go and build a fortress. I saw some guy was building a fortress and shooting bow and arrows and having a nuclear fallout shelter. I think that's a little extreme.
Yeah, maybe it's important, as we're wrapping up, when we give some actionable solutions about making sure that perhaps you have some food set up, that if you feel pissed off and you're watching this, or you make some looks around, that take that energy that you're feeling and instead use that in positive ways. Mm-hmm. And then what it sounds like you're saying is, don't let the fear of what may happen just completely take you out of the sorts of the steps that you can take. So
just be in control, yeah. And don't ever say you can't do anything, because anyone can do anything. You just have to put your mind to it. And that is true. You may say, I don't have enough money, I don't have this. The money will come. The people will come. If you're producing art, you're doing what you love, you will find a way to succeed.
And you stay in the process of it, is that what you're saying? Stay in the process of creating the art, and then the outcomes will come.
Exactly. And people will, and if you're doing what you're passionate about, people will be drawn to you, and they'll see that, and they'll want to lift you up. And a way to now, I think so many people are scattered, so much is going on, they feel out of control. And for me personally, I felt like a way that I felt more in control was to be really educated about what's going on, especially financially right now. And just to kind of have the warning signs for when we may be close to the dollar collapsing, and just preparing enough that I can, get by if there's a couple months where food is tight, or water and whatnot. And that makes me feel more in control and more at ease, I'd say. So, I mean, short of sounding like doomsday, I just think it helps to
Doesn't sound
prepare
like doomsday.
and come up with solutions.
Sounds intelligent to me.
Yeah, and it made me feel, that just for me relieved a lot of anxiety once I knew I had prepped, you know?
For sure.
Yeah.
And so Amber's book is Peace, Love, and Pepper Spray, and I'm getting another copy for my dad. So it's a photojournalism format book, and I recommend checking Amber out. Where can people find some more stuff and be inspired by you?
AmberLyon.org, Lyon. Also, peaceloveandpepperspray.com. You can find out more about the book. And I usually post all my art photos and my news stories on AmberLyon.org.
Okay. Yes, no question. Do you meditate?
I do, yes.
Did you hear that? A beautiful blonde woman that meditates.